Hey guys, welcome to the Troy Gramling podcast. It's so good to see and be heard once again. I want to remind you that you can find the podcast on all the different platforms as well as a video version on YouTube. And we're talking about life, love, and leadership. Health is a big part of that, really plays a role in all those issues. If you think about it, it's difficult to be an effective leader or lover, and even life itself can get difficult if we don't take care of our health. And so we're talking about all the different aspects of health. We're meeting some interesting people. That's always the part that I enjoy the most. It's interesting how God's made us all different and given us unique gifts so as to be able to actually help one another. And today is no different. I want to welcome Dr. Matt, or Matthew, which would be the more...
Matt, I prefer.
All right. Dr. Matt and Valerie Slane, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Well, tell us what you do and a little bit about your family.
So, Valerie and I are both emergency medicine physicians. For the last 15 years, we've been practicing emergency medicine. We trained at the Medical College of Georgia in Augusta, Georgia. We've been married for 10 years, and we have 4 children, all boys. And we've been down here in South Florida for the last 6.5 years.
So is South Florida, for those maybe listening anywhere in the world, but South Florida any different than Georgia?
Very much so.
Coming from Arkansas, I know there's quite a difference between those states and South Florida, for sure.
A lot more people.
So now, did you guys meet in medical school or after, or at the doctor's office or the hospital, or how'd you meet?
We met in residency. We trained together for the 3 years that we were in Augusta. I went to medical school down here in South Florida. I grew up down here locally. Valerie grew up out of country, so our first time we met was in residency.
Out of country. Now tell us where.
So my parents are missionaries in Nicaragua. They're youth with a mission missionaries. And so I was born on a YWAM base. And so my parents raised us in Nicaragua.
Nicaragua. You know, that Nicaragua, what I know about Nicaragua is the opposite of good health. It's cigars. So we're going to talk about the missionary things that you guys have done as well. But before we get there, so 15 years in emergency medicine. So I assume emergency medicine has your heart and your passion. Tell us why. What is it about emergency medicine that causes you to continue to serve there?
So for me, a lot of it had to do with just my upbringing in Nicaragua and seeing all the diversity of the ability to take care of patients. My parents hosted a lot of medical teams. When I was young, I was the translator for all these medical teams that came from the U.S. And so I got to see these small clinics that would just pop up when missionaries would come. And I got to see all the people just lining up and coming into this clinic, and you never knew what you were going to get. And so when I went to medical school, I found that the ER was very similar to these clinics that we did when we just opened the door and people showed up and you never knew what you were going to treat. And sometimes we had an OBGYN and people were like, well, I have this cut or I have this other thing. And so it was the same thing. So I knew that I wanted to just see everything and be prepared. And I knew that I wanted to do some sort of medical missions with my career. And so emergency medicine just kind of fit everything. And here we are today doing.
So now, were your parents surprised when you told them you wanted to be a physician, or were they expecting it? Or
no, I was around 5 when I started saying that I wanted to be a physician. My parents were living in Guatemala at the time. We were doing the mission first put them in Guatemala, and we started working with the refugees from Nicaragua there because Nicaragua was too unstable. And we actually found a local physician who was a refugee himself, and he volunteered his time on the weekends and at nights to do these clinics for the Nicaraguan people. And so we supported him. And so I saw him as a physician providing his own free time to his own patients. And my aunts and my grandmothers were nurses. And so they would come along. So since I was 5, I was doing nights and weekends helping my parents, and I was like, I want to be like him. And so there was no surprise, and I'm kind of very driven person, so there was never any doubt that that's what I was going to do.
Awesome. That's cool. So what about, how'd you end up in emergency medicine?
I think my pathway was a little bit different. Coming out of medical school, I initially started training in general surgery, and my training was through the military. For a couple different reasons, it felt like that was not the appropriate career path for me. I enjoyed the work of being in the operating room, but it was kind of the other aspects of surgery and the idea of owning my own business and running a clinic that did not appeal. So took a little time to kind of figure out my path and my way, and I kind of fell back into emergency medicine. I had some friends who that's where they studied, so I started looking into it, worked a little bit in some urgent care type work, and then got deployed to Iraq with the military. And then for a year, basically being over there and handling significant amount of trauma amongst our soldiers and our partner countries there, and just kind of really practicing that acute care of anything coming through the door, anything from, again, what Valerie's talking about, small injury to obviously significant amounts of trauma over there, and kind of sold me. I think all of us in EM are a little bit kind of, ADD and difficult to stay focused. So a specialty where there's always something coming through, some type of interesting action and patient just kind of draws us to it. The longer I've been in it, though, my love for the specialty has only grown, because you really do have a chance to kind of step in and impact people truly, and kind of, for most of them, what's their worst day in their life. Right. So it's that opportunity to kind of step in and be some type of, kind of a little bit of a beacon of hope for them, even if it's a family, even if it's going to be, from their standpoint, a negative outcome, still the ability to kind of be there and be with them during that.
So are our emergency room doctors adrenaline junkies, would you say? Because, I mean, I'm sure you see, we'll talk in a moment, the kind of cases you see, but that's my perspective, which could be completely wrong.
For the most part, I would say yes. We're very adventurous people. The personalities are pretty much, we want that thrill, like this constant, we want to be busy. Like there's nothing worse than going to a shift and not seeing anybody and just being there. Like we want to see the sick patients, which sounds weird because we don't want the people to be. Right, but if we're there, we want to be busy.
Yeah, we enjoy the chaos, and that's kind of when it gets a little bit out of control. That's where, I think we're at our happiest.
So let's talk about that a little bit. What brings people? I was thinking about what brings people into the emergency room. So, and again, I'm sure every place you've served is a little bit different and that kind of thing. But so let me just ask some questions, and you guys let me know: is it mainly illness or accident that you would see, or is it different every evening or every day?
I feel like that also is very seasonal, okay, and also depending on the community that you're surrounded by. So at where I work at Kendall, we serve a largely Hispanic population, underserved population, immigrant refugee population. So they're going to come to us for a lot of primary care. They don't have a regular doctor. They just got here in the United States in the last sometimes 24 to 48 hours. And so you're seeing them, they're coming from, a lot of these Latin American countries, third world countries, and they have they're unloading on you their entire life. And with that, some of it, they're bringing it with them, the PTSD of the travel and the trying to get here. So we're going through that. We're also right next to the turnpike. So we're getting trauma after trauma, mostly motor vehicle collisions. We don't get a lot of the gun shots and everything. They're pretty tame people around there. And then we get tons of strokes and heart attacks that are coming in as well. So it's just kind of dependent on where you are. And then if there's some sort of big festival going on, or the summer, we see a lot more accidents. In the winter, we see a lot more illness. So that's at least where we are in Kendall. So I think it's a little bit different at the two hospitals you work at, Matt.
Similar, I would say probably majority on the illness side of the house. In this kind of South Florida community takes up our bigger patient population. In the military, I was at Fort Bragg for a while, home of the 82nd Airborne. It was trauma, right? And then throwing humans out of airplanes and they're bouncing off the ground. Their leading cause of emergency department visits are going to be trauma related. So, but it's definitely dependent shift to shift. It's amazing how many injuries come in and not as many sick, and then it'll be kind of the opposite side of the coin in the next day.
So what about, we read a lot about fentanyl and it's spread into the country. Do you, in this part where you guys serve, do you see much drug type emergencies, overdoses, those kind of things?
So that's really different between my hospital and where he is. Again, at Kendall, we might see 2 a week drug related. Again, weekends, nights, holidays seem to be a little bit higher incidence of that.
And unfortunately for me, here in kind of this area, a little bit north of us, probably at least one a shift is coming in kind of that. So definitely a lot more exposure. And then fentanyl, heroin, kind of those drug lines and those opiate lines are becoming extremely prevalent up here.
And when someone comes in with a drug issue, are they unconscious? I mean, if somebody suspects somebody, what is the signs, or when to get medical care and when somebody's just taking some drugs, I guess?
Right. So usually in the cases that we have coming in, especially in cases like fentanyl, 911 is typically called because these are folks that have stopped breathing and for all intents and purposes look dead to the folks that are calling. So our police and our EMS responders are very good. They will start the treatment and the therapies in the field. A lot of times when the patients will arrive, they will be awake and back kind of at their baseline, upset that, their drugs that they ingested basically have been kind of rendered useless. And they become very combative and belligerent sometimes, and do not wish to get assistance and help, even though you're trying to have a conversation of, if you did not just have this antidote administered to you, you would not be here. And unfortunately, it has that tight of a grip on them.
That's, I think it's difficult, it's sad because you want to help people and to break free of some of those things. I mean, I'm got my coffee, which is not as destructive as those drugs, but it's got just as big a hole, to turn away from those things, I think is, and that's one of the great benefits of being a Christ follower, is to have the confidence that God can do what we even struggle to do sometimes with psychological and medical help. All right, I got a question that I know everybody out there listening has, and that's, when do you go to the emergency room? Because or at least maybe not. Maybe it's not. I'm the one that's got that question, but that is to me always the. Do I feel? When am I supposed to go? I remember I've had a couple stents put in my heart. And then, they're like, if you feel anything weird, my doctor tells me go to the emergency room. Sure. But then if I go to the emergency room, they'll tend to say, well, everything's fine. You know what I mean? So I know with COVID, I had COVID, and if it wouldn't have been for Pastor Danny, I would have been in big trouble because I would kept waiting and waiting and waiting. So when do you go?
We want you to go when you feel like you need to go. Maybe in your case, and your wife feels like you need to go, or somebody else. But we really want to be the catch-all for anybody who just is concerned. So, obviously our biggest goal is, life, limb, and eyesight. Those are the big things that we're trying to preserve in people. Obviously, that's going to mean different things to different people. So the main message that we want to get out there is that come to us if you're concerned about anything. We want to be that reassurance. We want to be the people that tell you that it's okay. We want you to come. It's safer to come and get checked out. And, we don't want the community to feel like you're a burden on us. We're really there with doors open. We're open 24 hours. I always joke with my patients when I'm discharging them, and I'm like, please come back. We literally don't close. There's never a time that we're not going to be here for you.
And patients do. They feel that they are burdening you, and they'll apologize now. I'm so sorry I came in for this. And usually that's what I try to reemphasize with them. We would much rather you come and me not be able to find something wrong. That's a good day for me. Please come. Let us take a look at you. If there's anything that you're concerned about, that's what we're here for.
Now, the big obvious ones that sometimes you need to tell the hard-headed people is, obviously if you have chest pain, you need to go to the emergency department. We have a difficult time sometimes discerning what it is that's causing it. So we don't expect the layperson to understand, like, this chest pain, oh, it's definitely from the weights I lifted yesterday. People try to convince themselves that they're not going to die. Well, let us help you kind of determine that. If you have shortness of breath, if suddenly you can't walk, the 10 feet or up a flight of stairs, that's concerning. And those kind of things definitely are the big ones. Any kind of confusion, that you're just not feeling like yourself, or in the case of a stroke, not speaking correctly, your arm isn't working the way it should, your leg. A lot of people try to just like blow it off. Oh, I'm going to have some coffee. That's the one we hear a lot. I'm going to get some coffee and this is going to get better. And sometimes it does because you're just a little tired. But for the most part, like, let us check you out and make sure that you're not having a stroke, a heart attack, or something bad going on.
So chest pains, confusion, any kind of different in your movements, those are the main, any of those events are occurring, you need to get to the emergency room.
Facial droop, people's like, you're smiling, not looking the same.
Right.
Like, I look a little funny today. That could be a stroke. You don't look funny. Not the Botox gone wrong, unless it's just the Botox. But let us tell you that.
Yes, that's good. Now, do you find that most people have that same sense of wrestling about whether to go or not go? Is that something common?
I feel that, it is very common. I think our older generations, the ones that may be more likely that there potentially is something going wrong, there's a little bit of a denial component, so they'll hold off a little bit longer in coming. So a lot of it is having that conversation, educating the family, that's the kind of the typical, family's been asking somebody to come to the hospital for a day, couple days and all that, and they finally get to a point that they will come in. So I think we tend to see that as we get a little bit older, maybe a little bit more stubborn.
So what about, do you think, I know a lot of times the wait time even sometimes can, I don't want to go there and sit. I'll wait it out a little bit. Do you ever think that or see that has any kind of impact on people's decision whether to come or not to come?
Yeah, a lot of places definitely have longer wait times. The different hospital systems have just different approaches of how they're going to handle the wait room. I can tell you where we work. We work at amazing hospitals, and we are training also other physicians. And the way we train them is that waiting room is your patient. And so we actually go out to the waiting room and we greet our patients. So we see them. Our goal is to see them within the first 10 minutes of their arrival.
Wow.
So maybe we don't do like the entire workup, obviously, or know everything. But in those first 10 minutes as physicians, we have learned to discern that how sick this patient is based on how they look, get some of their story, get some stuff kind of worked up. So the HCA facilities are really good at doing this, and we have really, really short wait times. So we really have, I believe, from my training, this is a completely different approach to emergency medicine, and it's very comforting as a physician to know that that's how we're training everybody, and everybody has that same approach to just go see you as soon as you get there. And yeah, you might still be in the waiting room, but we've seen you, and we're starting to address your problems. And then we know that if you're really looking bad, that we're going to bring you back and get things started, even if it's in a hallway. We'll take care of you.
Right. And that takes a lot of pressure off the administrative staff and everybody else that's, dealing with the patient and doesn't know maybe, how serious. I mean, they know that maybe some of the main things, but don't know quite how serious it is. And if you're with somebody, and you think it's serious, but you don't know, to quickly be seen can take a lot of anxiety out of the way.
And a lot of times I think the patient population doesn't necessarily understand that our triage system, we're always going to try to look at the patients that are the sickest and take care of them first.
Right.
So the nurses, us as physicians, everybody's there trying to see who needs to be seen first and kind of take care of those things. And then we never know what's coming in. So all of a sudden we could be talking to you about your abdominal pain, and we hear overhead that there's a trauma coming in, a stroke coming in, or a heart attack coming in. And so we know that those are very time sensitive matters. And so we might have to excuse ourselves from talking to you and go and take care of that. So that's kind of sometimes is a little bit like, wait a second, where'd they go? And it's hard for people to understand that, there's only so many of us there.
Right.
We need to get to people in a very time sensitive manner.
What about, and then we'll move on, but what about temperature? Like, is there a certain temperature, where somebody should come in or not come in, or is it different depending on your age? Or
So temperature is your body's normal kind of response to fighting off infections. So we expect, if you're sick, for whether a child or an adult, to mount an elevated temperature is an attempt for your body to fight off whatever it feels that is causing it to be ill. You feel terrible with the temperature. So as long as your temperature is elevated, you're going to feel bad. As far as, is there a magic number that triggers us to come in? Not necessarily, unless there is something that's artificially elevating your temperature. So if your temperature is high because you were working outside all day and you kind of collapsed outside, you lost the ability to regulate your temperature. So that is going to be concerning, because you can then go on to a level to injure yourself. But, if your child's at home with an ear infection, or somebody is, got the flu, 102, 103, 104, we see it, you feel terrible, but there's not a magic number to trigger it. You should still treat it just as you would treat any other fever.
Well, that's good to know. What are some things that people can do to help you guys when they come, like you said, it's the worst day of their life and there's anxiety, and depending on what the issue is, are there any things you could point out that we could do to help you in your diagnosis and to make everything more effective?
I think a lot of people that actually finally do come to the emergency department, there's obviously all kinds of different styles, but I find a lot of the people are trying to convince us that they're not sick. And so they're trying to downplay stuff, and they're trying to convince us that they're not sick. But we're on to those kind of people too. But in general, I think it's just being very straightforward, trying to give us the best description. And then just being very patient with us when we're caught between a bunch of different emergencies. And I think sometimes there's an expectation from us as emergency physicians that we're going to also give you the diagnosis. And we're trying to also make sure that people understand that as emergency medicine physicians, one of our top priorities is only to rule out the emergency. And we're not saying, just because we don't find the emergency, we're not saying that there's nothing wrong with you. It's just we're pretty convinced that you're not going to die immediately or maybe in the next 30 days from this. It doesn't mean you still don't need to go seek other additional care with different specialists. But some people get a little bit frustrated. We're like, so I don't find any huge emergency, but I don't know the cause of your pain. And they're just looking at us like, well, I wasted my time. We're trying to explain to them, no, we ruled out all these bad things. You don't need to go to the operating room today. We don't need to go put a stent in your heart right now. So that's kind of an interesting aspect of it. And so trying to, talk people into going to the emergency department, but then also like talk them off a ledge.
Yeah.
Like we didn't anything.
To be honest, really say that again, what the goal is.
To rule out the emergency is what we're trying to make sure that you don't have a life-threatening condition right now. And so a lot of people are just like, but why do I have this pain? And I was like, I don't know. And they don't like that answer. And we don't like that.
We don't want to know what's wrong with us. We want to feel better when we leave.
So most of the time I can make you feel better. I might not be able to completely take your pain away, but for the most part, I can make people feel a lot better. But it's that final diagnosis that I can't give them, which over 15 years, we're okay with that because we're okay with just ruling out emergencies. But it's it takes an art to kind of talk people into the fact that they need to also be okay with that.
Is it okay when you're advisable, I guess maybe a better word, when you're dealing with the doctor to give your opinion of what you think it might be, or is it better just to answer questions? Or
So we definitely don't want to anchor on anything. So that's a dangerous place. I think this is what's going on. This is what happened before. And you don't want to try to start dictating your evaluation and management by offering too much, but you also don't want to withhold information. So we definitely want to know an accurate history. And then, your experience in the past, what you might have had, but try not to kind of lead towards, too many directions like it hurts when I move my shoulder. I know it's from when I'm working out. You don't think that's my heart, right, doctor? And then they're just like, no, probably not. I'll just give you some, anti-inflammatories and go home, and you would hate to.
Right.
Yeah.
Now that makes sense. Let's kind of change gears here for a minute. So you're a DO.
Correct.
As opposed to MD. And you're MD. So what's the difference between the two?
So over 100 years ago, when there was two different specialties, a lot of it was philosophy based in kind of how the approach to the human body. It was, viewed a little bit more in treating the whole body itself. And this idea with the body is everything's in its proper alignment, it functions better, was kind of the osteopathic approach to it. That being said, in this day and age where after medical school, we all go to residency, the mentality we practice under is really based on where you've trained from your residency standpoint. That kind of leads a lot more towards our practice patterns. So philosophy and learning is kind of the big difference these days. And, everything is standardized throughout the country. Everybody has to take the same courses. You have to sit the same board exams. So a lot of that is kind of more semantics these days now.
So it was more philosophical in the early days.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us when it comes, maybe it's just the general things, but are there some things if the folks that are out there listening when it comes to that could keep us out of the emergency room? Based on some of the things that you've seen that bring people to the emergency room, what are some things that we could do so that doesn't happen?
So I think it's the things that we all kind of know and don't necessarily give ourselves time for. We need to eat healthy, and we need to exercise, and we need to sleep well, right? I mean, those are the main things that we need to do to be healthy, and then, have regular checkups with your doctor as well.
And then I think some of the other big things are just kind of our life choices, right? So obviously we know the harms of smoking and how it's dangerous. Wear your seatbelt when you're in a car and driving, and washing your hands. Probably if you could consistently do all those, we'd probably limit a lot of visits.
Wow. So it is the basic.
And helmets. Helmets when you're riding your motorcycle.
Yeah. And it's how difficult. So like you said earlier, as physicians, you want to help people. How do you deal with, or is there a frustration when someone comes in and it was easily preventable what they're going through? And so it's not that you don't want to give them time, but you're seeing somebody hurt based on a bad decision. Do you deal with that at all, or you just look at the problem and move forward?
So we take it into account, but we're kind of used to, just humanity. And we know that, and we treat them the same. Even if it's something preventable or something they did to themselves, we take them and we treat what's in front of us, and we are a very non-judgmental specialty because we see everybody that comes in. And so I think we provide a lot of, it's kind of, trying to, in the Christian way, just, looking at who they are and trying to help them where they are right now. And we know that people make mistakes and they continuously have bad habits and keep doing the things for themselves. Like the alcoholic is like the number one thing. Doc, this is the last time I'm going to be here. I promise you this is the time. And wholeheartedly, we want to believe them and we want to give them another chance. And we'll, watch them as they sober up or stabilize them if they have some sort of upper bleed, or, they can get esophageal varices and be really, really sick. But we'll walk them through that. We believe them so much, we're some of their biggest advocates. But we're also not surprised if it happens again, but we're always there for them.
And then I think as physicians, we're all educators of, the folks that come in. So we use it as a chance to teach. And it's an opportunity, like you said, in a non-judgmental way, to sit down, kind of discuss. They may be their own example that we get to use them for. But the opportunity to, provide some of that education back to them.
Now, what about then taking it home? Because, you're dealing with people who have had, a lot of times their lives incredibly impacted by what has gone on. And, you've done what you could to help them, and I'm sure there are times when there's not a lot that you can do. Do you take that home? Do y'all have a plan? Do you hold, one of the advantages I would think of being married is that you kind of know some of the challenges each other are facing. How do you deal with that? To take it home, not take it home, not let it emotionally just destroy you, really.
Yeah. So I think we definitely are over communicating with each other about it. One, we both love emergency medicine, so we want to talk about it anyways, but we luckily kind of have that outlet with each other because it's stressful. You will have poor outcomes, regardless of what we do. And I think that, kind of holding on to that information and not having the opportunity to discuss it, it will kind of eat you up a bit inside. And having somebody that understands kind of what you're going through, because medicine's complicated. It's hard to necessarily have those conversations with folks that may not understand what you're doing. So I think it's been definitely one of the strengths in our marriage that we've had the opportunity to kind of share that back and forth.
And I think, we really do take it home, and we really do take on a lot of the pain and the suffering that our patients are going through. But that's kind of why I love what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to have that empathy, and I want to feel, the pain that they're going through. And I think it's a little bit different between, a man and a female kind of going through it, and that nurturing part of it. I do take a lot of that on, but to it, you have to have a balance, but I don't want to lose that connection with my patients. It's one of the things that I love. I love being there for them, like I said, in the worst day of their life, and just being part of that and just being able to be a positive impact in them. And I don't ever want to lose that. So even though it does take a toll on us, I think it's worth some of a toll on me. Like, I think that the people that I'm saying, my patients that I'm seeing, are valuable, and I want them to know that, and I want them to understand that I'm there for them, even though it takes an emotional toll. Obviously, we have some different, barriers in our lives that, we've seen so many people, unfortunately, dying in front of us, that there is some sort of, we do have a little bit of strength about what gets us, and we never know what patient it is that's going to break us down. But like we teach residents, and I teach them, you need to allow yourself to feel. You need to feel these things. And, sometimes, you after a bad shift, you just cry the whole way home. But I don't want to lose that, because I think that's what makes me a better physician, is because I can actually connect with my patients and that I can feel those emotions as well.
Oh, that's very good. Got to go here, and then if you guys have some time, we'll do a little bonus section, because I want to talk about your missionary work. My last question is this, because since you both are involved in the educating of physicians, do you see that most of the folks entering the medical field today, are they pursuing what you just talked about when it comes to empathy and care, or are they pursuing, because most people pursued physicians, doctors, as making a lot of money. So do you, or by the time they get to you guys, have that kind of gotten weeded out? What do you see?
So we definitely see both ends, right? And so as a program director, at least that is one of my biggest passions, is to instill the kind of passion that I have for just taking care of the entire human and giving them value. So I think that's something that can be taught, and then something that can be inspired in them. But, we definitely do see some people that are just like, okay, I just need to see the next patient because, it's part of the business aspect of it. And wow, we could talk for hours about some of the healthcare issues and the healthcare system in the United States, and how it's kind of continue to go down maybe a different pathway from like our initial intentions of just taking care of people.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. And like I said, we'll take a break here and then come back and talk about your missionary work, if that's okay. I think folks would love to hear about that. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in today and watching or listening. Don't forget to share with someone. It's on all the major platforms, as well as video format on YouTube. So thanks again, Doctors Matt and Valerie. Appreciate your time and your incredible insight. And we'll see you next week here on the Troy Gramling podcast. Stick around for some bonus conversation or interview talking about the mission work that they both do. We'll see you next time.